All right, hello, welcome back to Go Coder. Today I want to talk about a new tool that I stumbled across that Tech Expert 2910 released on the local llama subreddit. Now, this didn't get a whole ton of attention, but a decent amount, 120 ups here. It is a desktop tray application that runs on Windows. I've only tested it on Windows, that uses your local LLM to actually basically provide you local Apple intelligence. It's a really, really clever solution. Very simple. It's not perfect. It has bugs. It's crashed on me a few times. But I've actually really enjoyed playing around with this. And I actually now leave it running all the time. So let me jump into some examples of how that all works. The first thing that I would say is I'm really interested in using this to summarize articles. So I'm very interested in the new GPUs that are coming out. So I take a look and find the first article I could find doing a Google search, and I decided to summarize information about the 5080. Now, what's interesting is this article I think came out in October, so it's been a little bit, and the price points that it was calling out here were substantially less than the more recent ones that I've seen. I ended up doing key points, which I think is better for me for these types of articles. Summary is also nice, but I think key points formats this very well. And I'll show you kind of what summary does here in a minute. But you can see here the price estimate being $9.99. When I saw that, I'm like, oh, that can't be right because I've seen recent reports on that. So I go back through the article and I look, and it did say $9.99 in there. So I found another article, and this time I decided to do a summary of it. And this is a more recent article, pretty much very similar content, just more up to date information with some of the leaks and stuff that are happening. And it talks about the price range of the 5080 being $1,400 to $1,600 USD, which is absolutely nuts in my mind, and pricing out most of I'd say the gamer market. And anyway, like this is just incredible, like to have with a two button combo. So for example, on my keyboard, I hit Control F12, it launches it. If I have something selected, it has that context immediately. Doesn't mess up my clipboard. It does everything that I'd want it to do. I can now chat with the article and get information, which I'm showing here. So I asked how much VRAM it has, and it answered correctly. My next example is this email that I'm doing here. Now, this email, I decided to have one written that was just like all slang, right? Like just all very unprofessional. And I wanted to see if it could switch it over into a more professional tone. To be fair, I had ChatGPT or Claude, I can't remember which one, actually write this email. And I decided to switch it over to professional. Now, the one bit of feedback I'd say is at this point, you don't know anything's happening, but it does replace the text for you eventually. So if it fails, you might be sitting there waiting and the text never replaces. It doesn't happen often, but it has caught me a few times. So I ended up switching this over. Like, very nice. Like, if you read this article or this email here, it sounds very, very professional. And then I tried changing just the subject line to something friendly there, which I thought was kind of cute. And it even put a little emoji in there. And again, like the model that you put behind it can make your content so much better. If I remember right, Apple Intelligence uses like a 3 billion parameter model, so they can actually even run it on phones. The next thing I want to do is I grabbed this white paper from ChatGPT. This is basically research about ChatGPT 4 and its capabilities. You notice here I had a little bit of trouble highlighting it, but I wanted to see how good something like this was like interacting with a PDF. So I downloaded this. I have it on my local document, and I decided to like summarize this. And I did actually go through and compare the information. So this particular model did a really good job at explaining what this all was. And think about like what the power that this actually just gave me. I now can take a white paper, feed it into context, ask questions about it, and get a summary of it like super quickly. The one limit you do have is your context window. So one of the problems that I originally had is I was defaulting to just a 4096 context for my model, so I ended up having to just reload it with a lot more context so I could do larger amounts of summarization. And when it does fail, depending on how your server that you're hosting the model in, like sometimes it'll just crash. Like the model will just literally crash. So I do a few more examples here where I'm just grabbing content out of here. Uh, I still have trouble like highlighting. I don't know why PDFs like don't copy and paste very well. I'm grabbing a lot more context. That's my test here. I'm grabbing a significant amount of text and I'm gonna attempt to do a summary of this and we'll see what happens. This is a lot more tokens that I'm loading in this particular case. And you can see it's fairly quick. Like it's thinking here, but it actually returns, relatively quickly. And the response here is actually very nice. All fits within one screen, super easy to read. All right, so the next thing I decided to do was test the rewrite capability. So I have this other email here where it's a funny email I wrote to amend the current dress code to make sure we all have baseball caps, and decided to do a rewrite on this to see what ends up changing. And so here it did. It did a full update on it. I noticed that some data, you gotta go through and clean some stuff up. Subject was put in there. Didn't really need that. And I'm gonna end up trying a few other examples here. Selecting everything. And I end up doing concise, which honestly I wasn't the most impressed with the concise tool. I think that prompt needs to be worked on a little bit because you see it changed. But honestly, I was expecting it to be a lot more concise. But again, that could be the model. I'd need to test it on some other models to see how that actually performs. But again, that was odd to me. That threw me off. And there's sometimes I did concise and it was like basically the same size, same amount of text as before. So I didn't really know. I'd love to actually understand how that prompt is actually being made there, so I could improve that some. But in general, it's a really handy tool to be able to mess with when you're doing emails, and I really, really enjoyed playing around with that. The next test I wanted to do, I just did it here because you didn't modify it, is the table generation. So I took a bunch of data from one of my benchmarks I did to determine if it could actually format a table. Now, I've tested this with three different models, and some of them do a phenomenal job at formatting it in markup table format. Some of them do not. And this particular one, it feels like it did a pretty good job. It put the questions across the top and then the models across the left. I've seen some like formatted completely different. Next thing I want to do is just see if I can use the tool to get some information on like writing an email. So I'm gonna now get some like how can I apologize for changing the dress code to wear baseball caps? And then I'm like, okay, I don't mind that. Now turn this into an email for me. And I'm using this without leaving the context of like what I'm working in, which is I can't state that enough. It's incredibly brilliant. I can't imagine Microsoft not releasing something like this sometime. But being able to run this all locally without sending this over to some cloud server to have all of your data is just phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. Now here I tried a few things. So I'm like, hey, what? How could I change just this line to professional? Watch what ends up happening here. It ends up doing, Dear Sir, I trust this message finds you well. So again, it's not perfect, and that's probably up to the model. And I tried it a few times here just to see, and it kept trying to like create an entire like email with the format of that. It just didn't make sense to me. So anyway, I gave up on that and decided to proofread. Now, I should have actually done some tests where I purposely added some errors in there, but you can see some minor changes in here, particularly the spacing change, which I thought was kind of interesting that it did that. The friendly thing is probably one of my favorite because it can take something that you said, were saying before, and this doesn't sound bad. If you read this, like this isn't bad at all. Even adds emoji in there for a little bit of like friendliness. So now I wanted to test like, all right, how useful is it to just ask it? information. So I asked them some stuff that I knew, which capital of Germany is Berlin, and then I asked how many people live there, and the answer should be around 3.5 to 3.8 million. I can't remember exactly. So yeah, 3.7 million, and that's as of 2021. So it's relatively truthful, this particular model. But again, having it like right here in this context is just it's just absolutely amazing. And I started asking it some other questions like, is population growing or shrinking? And it's super cool. Like if I could run a 70 billion parameter model or even a 405 billion parameter model and have this in my house so that every computer has access to this for like my kids and everything, this would be incredible. It would just be part of like their workflow. They'd write an email, they'd write an essay, they'd be able to proofread it. Like I don't see how this doesn't become something that's just part of the computer experience, to be honest. Super nice. It replaces text in place. Now here I'm showing you the model I was using, the Mistral Nemo Instruct. I'm injecting that, and now I'm going to show you a little bit about like how to actually change. This is all the settings you can do. So you can see my API URL. I can say I want to load the 5.4 model, and I'll just do a couple quick tests with 5.4 to show you sort of how that works. So I'm going to make this professional. Now, the first time you run, if the model's not loaded into memory, it will take a little bit longer because the model has to get pulled into memory before it can actually start processing the token. There we go. We have it. You can see some stuff, a little bit of stuff got duplicated. Super easy to clean up. And I think that might be because I didn't highlight it all correctly and it only replaced like part of my message. But this one sounds good. 5.4 is a 14 billion parameter model. I still have the unofficial version and it's great. Like I really like that model a lot. It runs very well, has a decent amount of context for what I'm doing. So for that same thing, I want to just go test a little bit of the white paper stuff here too with 5.4. I tried to grab a ton here, and let's see if this will end up working. So I'm taking a summary of this, and this is going to take a little bit longer because it's just so much context it's kind of feeding in. Plus, the model is, slightly bigger than the Mistral one that I was running, so it's going to be a little bit more processing that's happening. But no, this is a great summary of that. And I could probably ask it some questions to get some additional information on it. You can kind of read a little bit more about some of these various models in these white papers, which I've been enjoying a lot, but it's kind of a dry read. So having this kind of built in so I can kind of like analyze sections and then get a summary and then ask questions about it, I think will help me better be able to grasp exactly the internal workings of these things. Because I do understand a lot around how neural networks work. I built my first one back in 2006, I want to say, maybe 2005. Very simple one. But really, they have just been they have advanced astronomically since that time. A lot of it is around the compute, just the amount of compute we have. This is also mind blowing. DeepSeek V3 is getting amazing stats on a lot of the rankings and stuff. 5.576 million to actually pre-train it. That is incredible. I can't imagine. I mean, that sounds a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but compared to what other places are spending, they did such a great job. So anyway, in closing here, please check this out. Try it. You can always like tip him too. He's got like a buy me a coffee link. I'd recommend doing that if you find value in it. I did do that for him. I do hope that he continues working on this. I do predict, though, that Microsoft is probably going to release something on their own, and I think that's okay. I think that'll be totally okay because things like this will still have a place because you'll want to run them locally. You want to run like local models and not have all your data being sent to the cloud. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. Till next time, peace out.